Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. So today we have a very special guest. She's like, we are doing our first cross-border collaboration, and this is Kinza Raza Khan from Pakistan. She's currently working in Careem as a SD2. Careem is actually an Uber company. It's like Uber that you see all across the company. Careem is doing this for the Middle East, and she's working in the database team, database infra team. So welcome, Kinza. Let's have your quick introduction.
Thank you, Ankit, for having me. So, hello, guys. Ankit has given a really good intro about what I'm working as at Careem. And just like um, a little fun fact that I've been at Careem since about like more than a year, and it's my first job. So I landed this job right after I graduated, which makes it like even more interesting for me. So everything that I learned up till now, it's a great learning experience so far, and I'm looking forward to sharing all of my insights with you guys.
So we'll start with certain questions. So this is because she's working mostly in the databases team. So the questions will mostly be around the databases side only. So let's start the question. So can you describe what a typical day looks like for a database infrastructure engineer at Careem or Uber?
So I'm really glad you asked because prior to joining as a database engineer, I myself had no idea that there was actually a position which catered to databases because I thought in my undergraduate, like how in depth could you possibly go, right? So what I heard about was database administrator, which is the common term that's used, but not a database engineer. So it's pretty interesting to be honest, because as a database engineer, we get the flavor of a lot of things, right? So it's we dabble with DevOps, we deal with databases, obviously, but it's not what you'd have in mind. Like we're not really writing SQLs or we're not doing normalization or any of that mostly. That's not what our day looks like. So to understand what exactly we do, we have to consider the sheer size and the data that Careem handles, right? So as you know, that Careem is operating in various countries and various cities, and we do not take any downtime. So that would mean that our databases need to be completely reliable, and we cannot afford even a minute downtime, right? So any maintenance activities on our databases, any kinds of upgrades, any kind of migrations, DDL activities, all of these need to be taken into account very, very carefully and by informing all of our stakeholders, the relevant service teams. So that's a very critical part of our day. As well as that, like obviously, based on the databases, like we have a lot of databases which have terabytes of data, right? And performing any kind of migrations, any kind of DDL changes on tables of those sizes takes like weeks to go. It's a very critical activity. So that in itself is, very challenging, and along with that, like along with the time and manual effort that it requires, we also need to ensure the data is accurate, right? We do not have any redundancy, any kind of errors. We have to prevent that as well, mitigating all of that. So that's again another critical part of what we do. As well as that, we also deal with like compliance and audit requirements on our data stores. And another thing that I'd like to mention, like as part of the storage team, we basically cater to all of the data stores, right? The transactional data stores. So currently we're using AWS, the relational database system, like that's RDS, the service that they have. And along with that, we also cater to DynamoDB. We have started taking ownership of Elastic Cache, of Redis, and as well as Kafka. So these are some of the technologies that we're overseeing right now.
Being a part of Google, I would also recommend that you guys also like take a look at the products from GCP. Like they are equally good.
Taken into consideration.
Cool. So you just mentioned with a lot of teams. So what kind of team structures are there for like managing these databases infrastructures in your company?
Exactly. So, like considering the hierarchy and about the data governance, basically, like I think that's a very important aspect of any company, and I believe that does vary from organization to organization. But since we take ownership of all of the data stores, how it works is that we've got our own set of guidelines, our own set of standards, and we provision the databases according to that. We have a look on them. We have a look at the metrics. All of that is like under our domain, right? And we've got the service teams, which are since we follow microservice architecture in within Careem, what that means is that we've got like multiple service teams working, right? And they have their own database and like their own data stores. But at the end of the day, it's our responsibility to make sure that we're able to scale them, we're able to optimize them, we're able to maintain their health and performance. That comes on to us.
Right. And how does the collaborations, like the inter-team collaborations, look like between your team, the software engineering team, DevOps, for the whole management of the system?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. So I'm really glad about the collaborative work culture that we have at Kareem, and I'm not just saying that, but I really mean it because the way that it works is like service teams, they will come to us with any requirement that they would have. For example, they need to migrate from their MySQL to Postgres RDS, right? And we need to support them with backfilling jobs, with migrations. We need to actually help them out with the strategy and how they can make that seamless transition, right, without taking downtimes. So that, and then of course, since we're part of the infrastructure team, so we do have a lot of hands-on experience with like DevOps ourselves. So most of it we do ourselves. We do not rely much on the other teams. But when we do require support, for example, we've got a dedicated team which manages like CI/CD, Jenkins, all of that, right? So anytime that we do get stuck with like permission issues or something, then we can reach out to them. It's a very collaborative work culture, and all of the teams they get together. And the best thing is that despite your own OKRs, you like what I've observed within Careem is that people would go out of their way to help you out with any block tasks. So that's really cool.
So in general, so for example, like database is a very niche kind of a thing. Like not a lot of people are like dealing day in day out with the databases and all. So what kind of tools and technologies are specifically available for someone who's working as a database engineer? Like what you guys use on a day to day basis to like investigate the things and all?
All right, that's a very interesting question. So, in terms of databases, for like, the first layer, I would say is the monitoring layer, right? And that is super important, and a lot of it, like it's a collaboration, right? So it's a mix. With some things we've built ourselves, and then we're also using other tools. So the tools that we use are DPM, that's DPM by SolarWinds. It's a paid tool, and their tool Vivid Cortex is really good for database monitoring and the query profiling and everything that really helps us to debug issues and troubleshoot any kind of performance issues that are going on with the database internally. Other than that, we also use the open source Percona monitoring. That's something really easy to set up, and it's also supported for MySQL, Postgres, a lot of other engines as well. So that is something we use as well. And besides that, we have done our own integration within Slack. So anytime we've got we've configured with CloudWatch alerts, and the integration is set up. So anytime that there's some spike in the database metrics, we'd immediately get alerts and we get paged. Like the second form of escalation is obviously that we get paged in case it gets serious. So that is also something really helpful, and we've got a lot of visibility. So apart from that, like as I mentioned, that the tools that we use, apart from that, there's a lot of automation that we've built ourselves based on Slack, right? So we have written our own scripts, and what it does is like we could be tracking the maintenance windows because a very interesting thing, like story time, a very interesting thing that happened is that there were some engine versions which were being deprecated by AWS. They were no longer being supported for MySQL. And though like they gave an end of life date, and what they said was that you have to upgrade it yourself. And if you don't,
Mm-hmm.
what AWS does is it force upgrades them. So that came as a surprise once because like at 4 a.m. in the maintenance window, we just get like these alerts and it starts paging us. So that was like a news for us because we did not expect that they would push force upgrades. So, building workarounds for these kind of scenarios, these kind of unexpected situations is really interesting because you'd have to collaborate, you'd have to understand what exactly could be a possible way out because this wouldn't be a very healthy way to deal with the situation if we just have unexpected downtimes on databases. So that is something that,
Right.
we also encountered. Other than that, also, yeah, I would like to mention
Yeah,
about yeah,
please
the
go ahead.
tools. So for database governance, as I mentioned, that we have this set guidelines and protocol that we use. Now, obviously, we have restricted access for all engineers on the console, on AWS console. They do not have access to modify, create, or any kind of activity related to databases. They're not able to perform. Only we have that access. But even then, of course, we use infrastructure as code. We use Terraform and TerraGrunt to provision databases, to maintain their state, to make any kind of modifications. So we already have this pipeline and all of this, repository set in place, and it's a very fairly simple process. If one day there's a service team that requires a database, they simply come to us, and they raise a PR in that, and we over it just go through, we'll approve, and the database would be deployed. And in aligning with that, in a similar repository, what we do is we also manage the service user credentials because we realize that this kind of work, and we just want to cut down any kind of manual toil, any kind of waiting hours for engineers. Like we want to expedite them. So what we did was we also built automation to provision service user credentials immediately, and that in itself is like this pipeline. What it does is it would just make the service user, it would grant all of the privileges that they require, and it would insert the credentials on AWS Secret Manager. So most of the service teams, of course, they do not require the credentials directly. They would just access that secret, and they would use it in their code. So that is also a seamless process that we've done. So yeah,
Engineer, right? I mean, is this like these are the things that you
exactly.
guys
Yeah.
handle by yourself, or like okay, not the
Yes, we
DevOps
do.
people?
We do all of this exactly.
Okay.
That's what I mentioned. That we've got pretty hands-on with all of this ourselves, so we don't really require assistance from other teams. We do this ourselves.
Seems like one of the most critical jobs that you guys are doing. I mean, you're not just like handling the databases, you're also like handling all the connectors and everything, the setup infrastructure. Seems like a lot more than
Exactly.
databases.
That is very true. And that is why it is also really exciting because it does, as I mentioned, give you a lot of flavors and it's not just concentrated on databases, what you'd expect.
So you also mentioned about the security and compliance, right? So how does your team ensure that databases are secure and compliant with the relevant regulations and standards? And I guess like there are every different countries have different regulations. So like how like are you using third parties or you're doing the management of those regulations by yourself?
Exactly. That's a very good question. So, with regards to security and compliance, we we recently had that compliance requirement, and what we did was, they had all these kinds of requirements about like the data not being retained for like a very long time within this defined set duration, right? And of course, for these kind of things, then we'd have to scrub the data, we'd have to manage it ourselves, how we handle it, or possibly take it to possibly take a dump to S3, something of that sort, right? But all in all, we manage it ourselves, and all of those compliance requirements, we deal with them ourselves. There are no third-party, companies or tools that we use which manage this for us. And another thing was that we, for like tracking all of this, as I mentioned, that we have these defined rules and guidelines for all the databases, and we have like multiple accounts. We've got production and staging even for multiple accounts. So like even if I were to give like a very rough guess, I'm pretty sure that we'd have like nearly like 300 to 400 databases roughly, right? And that's just on RDS, right? So what we do is we do have like dashboards to track all of these critical information. If like they have the execution timeout set, for example, because we cannot allow long-running queries on production databases. That would just if anybody were to run these kind of queries, that would be very disastrous on production databases and would take the system
Right.
down. So that is something that we take care of as well. And there's a lot of other metrics that we evaluate. And so that's we've got this one dashboard, one-stop dashboard where we track all of this, and then we consequently reach out to service teams for any kind of assistance, for any kind of modification, if to make them compliant and to make them on that standard.
Professional development opportunities are available for database infrastructure engineers?
Right. So that's a very interesting question because in the 1.5 year that I've spent at Careem, I've already had two trainings with AWS. Right. So the first training was an in-person training where we had a database specialist and solutions architect from AWS come over, and we had a week-long session. It was pretty interactive and pretty engaging, where we got to discuss our current problem statements, our use cases, and they gave us like alternate strategies. They gave us like ways to scale, optimize, and what was really good was that we were on the same page, and the kind of solutions that we had, a lot of them were just endorsed by AWS, and they really appreciated our approaches and our strategies. So that was really interesting. And apart from that, there was another AWS online training session that we had on during which we got like a really interesting training based on all of the database services that are that AWS offers, not just RDS, but apart from that as well. And along with that, we believe that we do require a lot of other skills just apart from knowing about databases. Now, for example, what I worked on in the past year was our in-house tool, which manages the user creation and user access for engineers, and that entire um, code was written in Java in Spring Boot, something that I had never touched. But I got that opportunity to work with it, play around, and actually deploy, and it was pretty interesting. So these kind of opportunities makes you realize that you do not have to stick to particular skills, and that's not really how it works. You do need to know a lot more about other skills. Like for example, as you can see, we do a lot of work with DevOps and deployment and all of these pipelines. So that's something that we need to know as well. And along with that, we do have access to O'Reilly and LinkedIn Learning, on which we do get a lot of informative content, which is also encouraged.
And what kind of experience or background is typically required for a database infrastructure engineer role, say in your organization or you can think of in any organization?
All right, that's a fun one. So, within Pakistan, if I'm being honest, I do not know many companies who actually employ database engineers. I've seen database administrators, but not database engineers, and certainly not at our level. And if I am to be honest, I believe that there will be very few companies that would actually hire fresh graduates as database engineers or within the infrastructure team. That's very uncommon because what you do require is a lot of experience. So, with that being said, I feel that we do not we do not go a lot into like coding or programming. That's not what we do. Yes, there's a lot of scripting, there's a lot of DevOps, and there's a lot of like the relevant database technologies that we require, but that's about it. And apart from that, like well, also having like experience with cloud technologies like GCP, AWS, that would certainly help because a lot of the time that we have is spent on like over there, right? So that's certainly a very good skill to have as well.
Like going by the skills only, so what other skills do you think are mostly important for getting a successful career in this domain, like a database infrastructure engineer? So what do you think, like are the other any other skills that would be really helpful for someone to succeed?
Certainly. So I feel that if you're working at a company with data at scale, right? So you would definitely need to have more insights about not just like transactional, not just relational databases, but other databases as well, like NoSQL, and a lot of like you need a lot of efforts to to know how to scale and optimize databases, right? To manage them efficiently, to, as I said, to carry out migrations over like databases of terabytes in size, for example, and ensure that there's no data loss, there's no data corruption. That's something that's really important. Apart from that, you would also need to be hands-on with infrastructure as code, Terraform, Terragrant. These are just a couple of tools. There are others being used industry-wide as well. You need to know about Jenkins, about GitHub workflow actions. If you're working on GitLab, this is extremely important because you'll be working in a collaborative way. Apart from that, scripting is really important. We do the scripting in Python mostly, but of course, there's no restriction. And along with that, a very interesting, like, this is something that I realized when I came over here because a lot of the time that we're working on EC tools, right? We're working in Bash, we're writing Bash scripts as well. We we're working
Mhm.
on Linux, we're working on Ubuntu, we're working on different operating systems and different distros of Linux. So that is also something that you need to have hands-on in. That would be really helpful.
So cool. I guess these were the only set of questions that I had, and it was a really great chat. Like this is something. So frankly, I'm also from the databases team. I'm from the
Oh
GCP
wow.
databases team only, and I would probably yeah. So we basically build the GCP. We basically build the databases for the GCP, and I would like highly recommend try out the Alloy DB. So Alloy DB is
All
like
right.
the GCP offering from post from it's a basically a Postgres based database which is like
All right.
completely managed. The scale up and scale down, everything is like completely managed, so do try that one. Apart from that, like if you guys are also looking at analytics, you can also take a look at the different analytics tools that the GCP offers. Like this is just a promotion of my work, so
Mhm,
do
yeah.
try out
That's
these
pretty
things as well
interesting
if you
for
guys get an
sure.
opportunity to kind of evaluate other products. Yeah.
That's pretty
Right.
interesting to
So yeah.
hear.
So right. So actually, like we also work on databases, but our work is slightly different. Like we are on the other side. We are actually building the platforms
Exactly.
to support these databases. We are not actually working along with databases, right? So we are working on
Makes
a
sense.
different way. But
I wanted to
okay,
ask you,
yeah.
like, before Google, where were you working? And did you work as a database engineer or were you
I
working in
was
like
work.
DevOps or something?
No. I have a very different a very uh, varied career. So before this, I was working in Adobe. If you would have used
Okay.
PDFs, so
Yeah.
I was a part of the Adobe PDF, Adobe Document Cloud team. So we were the ones who were like creating those Acrobat application, and the Reader application. From there on, I moved to the Adobe Scan app. If you would have used that app, so it was basically
Yeah.
for capturing the images and creating documents from them. So at that point of time, Cam Scanner was the market leader, but we kind of just completely beat them up in the market. So we had
Right.
achieved a really good like performance and quality was all like we had beat them in that domain. So we then
Yeah.
became the market leader. From there on, I went to like work in the liquid mode. So it's basically HTML based layout for a PDF. The PDFs are kind of static in nature, so we
Yeah.
gave them an HTML based layout. So that was called
Right.
liquid mode, and then like mainly I've like worked in the Adobe Document Cloud and then a bit in the Adobe Marketing Cloud. So Marketing
Makes
Cloud is
sense.
like if you would have seen those mailers, the promotional
Yeah.
mailers and all those things.
Yeah.
So we are the one who were creating that for a lot of clients. So
All
that's
right.
where, and then I landed up in Google. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. So like, since you're part of the same domain, what would be your advice?
For you, I think you guys are doing so. I'll tell you. So I was actually surprised during this session. I was expecting that you guys are just maintaining the databases and all, but from what I've heard in the session, I think you guys are doing a fabulous job. As a part of the database engineer myself, we also like work on these tools. So Google actually has all the tools in house. Google does not use any external tools,
Yeah, makes
so
sense.
we do not have any Jenkins or anything. We have our own tools here, and
Right.
as a part of like for example, like I am a part of the Oracle team, so I am expected to understand Oracle in and out and basically created these
Right.
services for you. Like for example, you were talking about AWS and all, right? So AWS is kind of streaming your data to the servers and others to their
Exactly. Yeah.
servers, right? Manage your databases, right? So they are writing some services along for those things, right? So we are the people who are doing the same for GCP. So this
Okay.
is
Okay.
how we work. We use very much the equivalents of Jenkins. We use very much the equivalents of loggings, dashboards, and all. The
Yeah.
good part is that in Google, a lot of code is kind of self-automated, so all the errors and all,
All right.
like most of the things are kind of in a very automated kind of a fashion. They are like flagged
Right.
off during the pre-submits itself, so you're not able
Makes
to
sense.
allowed to
That makes
basically
sense. Like the
submit the
CI
code
sites and
if
everything.
it's
Yeah.
anything. Right. Right. So
Makes
it's a very kind of a formulated, a very AI based approach that they take to manage like all the AI tools and all are kind of integrated in this code check-ins and all.
sense.
So yeah.
Right. Makes sense.
So
That's
it's good,
interesting to hear.
but I think I mean, see, I'll tell you. So Uber is again one of the very finest company in the world, and because like Kareem is working now with Google, I'm pretty sure. And plus, from what I've heard, I think you guys are doing a really good job. I mean, if considering the web development, I don't think that you should even be calling yourself as a database engineer. I think you should be calling yourself as a web developer only because you are doing more than a database engineer. So what I would advise is that remove that database infra engineer from your profile. I think I don't like from what I've heard so far,
Right.
you're doing much more than that, right?
Yeah.
So
Makes sense.
one thing like there are pros and cons. Like there are advantages of associating yourself with one domain, but
Exactly.
you're like the good part is that if people are looking for experts, then they will definitely reach out for you. If
Exactly.
people are like looking for a journal, like I mean, you're also restricting the opportunities for you,
Yeah.
right?
You're right.
So what
You're
I
right.
would advise is that like mention something like web developer with a specialization in databases, right?
Okay.
Mention
Makes sense.
something like that on LinkedIn, right? So that more people
Yeah.
can approach you, right? Because
Do
this
you feel
market
like
is really
do you
big,
feel like
and
this
I think
field
people
would get like saturated? Like after a while, you just be like, okay, there's not much to learn, or like, it's
so I'll
not
tell
so
you. So
innovative
that's why
anymore.
I have like right. So I have like never so I'm not stick to one career. I started with desktops, then I moved to mobile applications, then I have to move to like web development. So I've completely like whenever I felt saturated, I like
Yeah.
tried to make a switch and move to some other domain and all. So at times you do, for
Right.
example, maybe like after 4 or 5 years, you'll also be like why I'm like always like taking like doing the database sharding, migrations, and all those things.
Yeah.
I'm just fed
Exactly.
up of all these things. Should I try something new and
Yeah.
all? Should I move to Python? So these thoughts will come into your mind and see, like these companies, the good part about working in these bigger organizations is that there are a lot of opportunities. You'll get ample number of opportunities to like move to a different thing. For example, after like 10 years or 12 years, I thought that maybe I should be trying something other than PDFs. Like, I mean, like PDFs were even in my dreams. Like I was so much like working with the PDFs only that I mean,
Yeah.
even in my dreams, I was like seeing all those documents only. So that's why I thought
Yeah.
that maybe I should move from PDFs to somewhere. So I tried marketing cloud. Then got an opportunity from Google. So went in there,
Yeah.
but then the market is like completely open. You just need to have the right
Yeah.
set of skills and you can move anywhere, right?
Sounds good. Sounds good. That's
So
insightful.
that's what it is. You
Thank
are
you.
pretty much new in the market. Be open to anything,
Yeah. True.
right?
You're right.
Don't associate yourself with any specific domain for now, right?
Yeah. For sure.
But how is the
Sounds
software
good.
market in Pakistan in general?
It's really good. So that's the whole problem because a lot of it is so concentrated towards like software engineers and development, like the development side for developers mainly. So there's very less, fields now. Like obviously there is like we are evolving and there are like really good startups focusing on AI, but not so many, right? So and of course we always have that issue that we do not have these, the companies are not really opening their centers over here yet, like Google, AWS, all of these companies. So we do not have that edge yet, but I guess we're getting over there slowly and gradually. It's going to take a while for people to figure out that there's a lot more to this field than just like being a backend engineer or like a full stack engineer. There's a lot more.
Right. In fact, I like there's one video coming out here, and I'm discussing that what are the different kind of opportunities. So
Yeah,
basically, when one has to look beyond the backend and full stack engineers, like there are opportunities in mobile domain. Mobile development is one good option.
exactly.
Blockchain
Yeah,
is another one. AI,
Boston is really
ML,
good.
data science, data analyst. Like there are a lot of opportunities. Even database administrators is like one of the very good
Yeah,
opportunities. So I'm also like doing this video. It should be out in like one
yeah.
or 2 days. So wherein I'm
Okay,
discussing all
awesome.
these
I'll
opportunities.
I'll look
Yeah.
I'll look
But
out
I
for
mean, on
it.
the
Yeah.
contrary, Indian market is like very developed.
Yeah,
So
for
like
sure.
in
We
India,
really
we
look
have a
up to
lot.
it. We always say that the way they're going, we need to be there. That's super inspirational. How you guys just completely evolved over the past few years. And just like the other day, that's what we were discussing, how you guys have completely moved to like, this cashless sort of environment. Like it's really amazing. And
Right.
we just hope that we
Right.
can get there as well. It's super convenient.
Yeah. Right. And it's all like backed up by technology. So like the
Exactly.
country needs to have a lot of people in technology to support these kind of systems. So
For
I'm glad
sure.
like I
For sure.
found someone from Pakistan who is like so competitive in this market, and I'm like pretty sure that you guys would be also be there in just a few years. So yeah.
Yeah,
So
hopes.
cool, Kinza. Thanks for giving your time and happy Ramadan to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.